Aston Martin head into the new season as arguably the most talked about team, as they not only displayed good pace in pre-season testing, but rivals also noted the consistent behavior of the MR23. Going with what they've built as a bold and aggressive design, the 2023 car is the brainchild of Fallows and Blandin, the two having previously worked with Red Bull and Mercedes respectively. Aston Martin team principal Mike Crack has tried to keep a lid on expectations after a strong performance by the new MR23 in Bahrain Formula 1 testing. Even though the Aston Martin finished the 3-day test as the 7th fastest car overall, other teams were interested in its steady pace and Fernando Alonso's strong long-run performance. When questioned about whether or not expectations have altered, Crack was eager to downplay the significance of the outstanding testing results by drawing comparisons to the disappointment the team had the previous year. To be honest, I think it's very difficult on such a test to make a proper judgment, he said. I'll give you an example. Last year, we were P4, and P10 over the 3 days, and we seem very similar now. And in the race we were out in Q1. So just to tell you how much a test like that can give you an indication of where you are. So I think for us, we must not lose our goals. Our goal was to make a step forward in the performance of the car, in the team. And this still remains our objective. If we manage it or not, we will see next week. The season may begin with Aston Martin starting clear of the middle and as a serious danger to two of the established Big Three teams, according to the most aggressively optimistic interpretation of the company's test. Aston Martin was on par with Ferrari and a few tenths faster than Mercedes, according to raw long-run analysis. Crack did acknowledge that the car looked good on long runs, although he suggested that track conditions were flattering. The race simulation was certainly not bad, he explained. But we must also not forget that the track conditions were really good. You had a lot of rubber because there were other teams using new tires a lot of times, also with soft rubber. And this is helping when you do a race simulation. So again, it is nice to have good long runs, but still you need to really put them into the right context and let's not start dreaming. I think Fernando said it earlier, there are no miracles in F1. A fast Aston Martin wouldn't be a miracle, but Fernando Alonso was interested enough to say that there are no miracles in Formula 1. The new strategy for 2023 from Aston Martin, which has underperformed in recent years, is the first vehicle to have the blessing of Red Bull recruit Fallows. Hence, Aston Martin had the greatest opportunity of any team to advance significantly. Aston Martin might legitimately move up from 7th in the championship, 1 year to being discussed as a top 3 prospect, at least at the start of the season. Given these factors, along with McLaren being completely lost, Mercedes having a puzzling test, and Alpine looking a little mysterious. Given their larger resources and the fact that they started with a stronger 2022 car, those teams, particularly the biggest ones like Ferrari and Mercedes, have more room to grow. After a promising beginning, the Aston Martin may actually be closer to reaching its full potential. It undoubtedly had a more polished appearance than the Mercedes, and Ferrari needed a lot more work on the outside. Yet, according to Crack, the MR23 also had its moments. When asked Mike Crack about how good the car performed at the Bahrain testing, he mentioned that the car was not the best out of the box. He mentioned that Alonso wanted to try out many options as possible, in terms of setup and balance, to get to know more about the 2023 MR23. The positive thing here with Fernando was that he tried several things basically to fill his toolbox. So, he tried things where maybe sometimes he would say this is not the right thing to do now, but it is something that he wanted to have the information on because he knows that maybe in Melbourne he might need something like this, or in another racetrack, he might need something like that. It was about understanding what you have at your disposal from the car point of view from the setup point of view, and that is something that over the days he really developed. I think he has a better answer now, or a better feeling. With all this confidence and positivity, is it wrong for fans to assume that Alonso might be able to fight for podiums in this season, right? Well, I believe that qualifying 3rd or 4th and then fighting for podiums won't necessarily be the case, as there are 3 other big teams fighting for those spots in the podium. What Aston Martin and Alonso would do is be patient, just like what McLaren did in the 2021 season, use the chances they have, and be an opportunist of the mistakes the big 3 teams make to sneak in and grab as much points as they can on the early stages of the season. It is possible if the car is at the top of what it appeared to be throughout testing. But, given that the team is waiting for bigger and better facilities due to its upcoming new factory, wind tunnel, etc., the likelihood of that performance being sustained is definitely lower. So, the first few races may be the strongest part of the team's season. Even though it's entertaining to imagine Alonso appending Bahrain's established order, it's important to emphasize that even if the season opener features Aston Martin as the only lead midfielder, that would still be a really good effort and a fantastic foundation for what it hopes to accomplish in the years to come. That team currently has a certain amount of potential. Aston Martin should be behind Ferrari, Mercedes, Alpine, and even McLaren if they all utilize all of their resources to the fullest. Even though it didn't quite achieve that in the championship, Aston Martin was the 6th best F1 team at year's end, and the only other teams in the middle of the field that stood out were Alpine and McLaren. An accomplishment for Aston Martin this year would be to surpass one of those clubs. Getting in front of both would be fantastic. Even by the standards of Team Silverstone, one of F1's greatest irregular overachievers, anything more would be a significant overachievement. One obvious problem for Aston Martin going into the new season is that it has been missing one of its drivers during the entire 3 days of testing. Lance Stroll was unable to participate in the 3-day test due to wrist injuries sustained in what the team alleges was a bicycle accident in Spain. According to accounts, Lance is receiving care from one of Spain's top trauma specialists. The most crucial point to keep in mind is that the testing took place at the same Bahrain circuit that will host the season opening. These 3 days in Bahrain were the only collective testing before the new season begins. Fernando Alonso, when asked about Lance Stroll, said, "We cannot do it without him. I hope he can come back very soon." Alonso claims that throughout the 3 days of testing, Lance Stroll's feedback was greatly missed. He also noted that because he has relocated from Alpine, his personal feedback may be influenced by what he has learned from driving a different car the previous year. It simply indicates Alonso wasn't 100% confident if he was detecting a fault or just a point of difference between the Aston Martin and the Alpine. What Alonso is referring to as much-needed feedback can be basic things like steering feedback or brake pedal feeling. Lance has been with this team since 2019, according to Alonso, and he is certainly well versed on the 2022 Aston Martin. Lance Stroll would have been able to determine whether the new incidences are characteristics or problems that require attention if the Canadian had been able to confirm whatever new things were happening in the new 2023 car. Luckily, news came out of Aston Martin, revealing that Lance Stroll will be racing at the season-opening Bahrain Grand Prix. Yet, Lance is not used to the 2023 F1 car, which means he is yet to learn about the 2023 F1 car. That puts Fernando Alonso on the helm, and it puts more pressure on Alonso to deliver a gigantic result at the season opener if the car is indeed capable of providing such a performance. When asked from Fernando Alonso about how the team is planning to tackle the 2023 season, he revealed the team's plans and how the team is going to literally change nearly 2/3 of the car through its in-season development. This car, the aim was to make a step forward, which I think we did. It was very encouraging, the results from the test and the feeling from the car. This is just the start. This car will change dramatically in the season. That's the plan. I heard from the team that 2/3 of this car will change during the season, so we want to have a good baseline, a good platform to develop the car during the 2023 season, and maybe fight for something bigger next year, step by step. While Formula One fans are expecting Aston Martin to put on a tough fight against the rest of the midfield and against the likes of Ferrari and Mercedes, as the tech genius of Red Bull, Adrian Newey, feels that the MR23 will be a considerable rival to the front of the field. Aston Martin team principal Mike Crack believes it is difficult to make any quick judgments on their form, given their prior expectations being quashed once they reach the first race weekend, pointing out to the team's performance at pre-season testing and at Bahrain opening race in the 2022 season. But what do you guys think? Is Aston Martin ahead of the likes of Alpine and McLaren from the midfield? Does Aston Martin have the package which could potentially allow them to take the fight to Ferrari and Mercedes? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section down below. And on your way down, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to get notified of our future uploads to keep yourselves up to date about the 2023 Formula One season.